Our final myth is probably the most persistent myth out there about Monster Hunter. Even though I've debunked it on several occasions, there is a flat out refusal to listen even to Capcom themselves on this matter, or even to read and compare lists of names. What am I talking about here? The myth that there are two distinct Monster Hunter development teams, the mainline team and the portable team. The idea that one set of developers are responsible for creating Monster Hunters 1 through 4, plus World and Wilds, and an entirely different set of people responsible for creating Monster Hunter Portable 1, 2, and 3, plus Generations, plus Rise, and whatever comes after Wilds. The truth is, there are two Monster Hunter directors, and the teams are fluid and have great overlap in personnel. What's more, they each build on each other's work rather than maintaining two separate lines of development. It gets even more complicated now by the fact that we have executive directors and then regular directors working alongside them. And historically, it's even more complicated than how the myth dictates by the fact that the G-Rank expansions were often created by entirely different people, sometimes from the other team. I can understand where the myth comes from. Early on in the days of Monster Hunter, there were two separate teams, but only to the extent that back then you had to have different people on your team based on the platform which you were targeting. Software development worked very differently back then. Today, games are made on one system and targeted for build and distribution across a multitude of systems. And Capcom has thousands more developers than they did back in the day. So the people designing Monster Hunter games don't need to know anything about the underlying hardware like they had to 20 years ago. What's more important these days is your familiarity with the different game systems, the monsters, the lore, the weapon mechanics, and how well you work with other people. Do you really think Capcom would wall off 50% of their Monster Hunter talent from the other 50%? And force each side to do all their own work? Of course not. That's ridiculous. They would rely on the shared knowledge and skills that everyone brings to the table. It takes hundreds of people to create a Monster Hunter game, and they don't all work on the game at the same time. So it's very simple to schedule people across multiple Monster Hunter games. Where you're going to see the biggest difference in personnel from one title to the next is at the very top only. The people who are directly and ultimately in charge of the final product that gets shipped. And that consists of only about 3 people for each game. And the only reason Capcom continues to have 2 sets of directors is because it takes so long for them to complete development of a new Monster Hunter game from start to finish that they want to be able to release a new Monster Hunter title more quickly than it takes to complete development on one. For example, if it takes 6 years to develop a new Monster Hunter title, they don't want to wait 6 years in between game releases. They want to wait at most 3 years in between new title releases. The only way to achieve that is to develop 2 games in parallel. And so you need 2 sets of leadership to handle that development process. You don't need 2 entirely separate teams from top to bottom. Capcom has 3,000 developers in their developer pool that they can pull from to work on any project at any given time. And so people with particular Monster Hunter skill sets are going to work on whatever title the directors request them to work on. And thus, we have Kaname and Iichinose taking turns guiding the development of each new Monster Hunter title. But even after all that, knowing that there's 2 different sets of directors, 2 different leadership teams, let me ask you this question. Do you think that Kaname doesn't sit down with Iichinose to discuss Monster Hunter Wilds? Do you think those conversations never happen? Do you think he refuses to draw on any of Ichinose's ideas and advancements? If so, if you believe that, you're far more naive than you give yourself credit for. But look, who cares what the reality is inside of Capcom? Why is this even an issue? Isn't it just a matter of trivia, something for Monster Hunter fans to discuss when they have nothing else to talk about? Just a mere curiosity for the curious? Unfortunately, no, it's not a trivial matter. This myth that there are two distinct Monster Hunter teams is, in my view, the primary reason why there is such division within the Monster Hunter community. This one myth accounts for most of the tribalism and animosity you see between Monster Hunter fans. And I think this one myth does the most damage in terms of growing the player base. So many people refuse to play one or the other game simply because of the assumptions they make about it based on which quote-unquote team made the game. So yeah, I think it is important to understand how things work behind the scenes so we can far better appreciate what's going on at Capcom and not dismiss 50% of the Monster Hunter titles based on a fallacy. Now, these are just 5 of the most persistent myths in the Monster Hunter community. There are more. Feel free to put more in the comments. Spread the word. If you guys like this video, I will make more. So anything you want to see in the next one, just leave me a note down below. This is the kind of work that needs to be done to help more people enjoy more of the game and enjoy most of their time playing it. That's what I'm all about here on this channel. You can support my work through Patreon and by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. I'll see you guys in the next one.